All right, so just quickly, you remember last week we went through all the different model types, and we went through all the different model properties on each different model type. We talked about how to create these layers on the star. So I've created a star here with 200 nodes, and so I've managed to create 5 layers and make it look pretty cool. I've set these models up mainly because as we go through today, I'm going to show you some effects on them, and I want you to see how they look on different models. I've also put in this is a dumb string. This is a red string of bulbs. So it'll be a single channel on your controller, and I'm assuming the bulbs are all colored red, and I want to show how they come out. And this over here is the dumb RGB tree. So it's got 2 strings of dumb RGB bulbs, and I want to show how they come out as well. The thing that I didn't cover last week is there's a checkbox on here called individual start channels. And what this lets you do is you can come in here and you can actually, so this is 2 dumb RGB strings. So it's a total of 6 channels, as you'd expect. So it runs from 6752 to 6757. And what you can actually do is you can change the start channels individually for those 2 RGB strings. So if they're on very different channels on your controller, you can actually set those manually. This lets you do things like if you've got some strange string order which is not supported by this default starting location, you can sometimes get it to work. There are limitations. So in my matrix, if I'd done a funny order of my strings, so maybe I'd done every second and then I'd wide every second up after that, and so it kind of goes in an odd order, but they still all go. I could change that around using the individual start channels here and set different start channels for each string. What you can't do is say, well, this string goes this way, but the next one goes that way, but it's a totally different string. So yeah, so you do have the ability to actually control the start channels of individual models. You wouldn't do it very often, but every now and then you'll have built something and you'll find that it's a bit of a struggle to get it to work correctly in XLights, and so you can go in and do that. But today I wanted to spend time on the sequencer. And so creating a sequence, the easiest way to create a sequence is to press on the new sequence button. And that brings up the wizard. Now, the wizard's actually not linear. If you want to jump around, you can jump around and do things, but generally speaking, I would just follow it. You've got 2 choices here, animations and musical sequences. An animation is, I use this between, I did 3 songs last year, so I had 3 songs which I set up as musical sequences, and then between the 3 songs I ran a 2-minute sequence where I just ran the bulbs and tried to make them look interesting, busy, but not coordinated, so that when I could launch into my songs, all of a sudden the whole show came together in a coordinated way. So if you're not running music, you just select animation. When I'm testing, the vast majority of the time I'm doing animations, I only use songs when I really need the audio track. But most people are probably going to create a song, so let's click on that. So it'll pop up and it'll prompt you to select an audio file. Now here it's showing you all the audio files that I know for sure are compatible with the Falcon Pi player. If you're going to run your show, however, off XLights, there is another setting called XLights audio files, and if you select that, it will actually allow you to select a wider range of music file formats. In this case, these files are supported by both, so it doesn't really matter which one you select down here. This one here's a movie file. You can select movie files as your audio track. XLights doesn't mind, it will just extract the audio track from the movie and work that way. So if you're doing it to in this case, this is the Olaf song from that Disney movie, whatever it was. You can do that, and you can maybe show it on your matrix at the same time or whatever. It can look pretty good. or you can just pick a sound file. Now, it used to be this file here, for instance, this is an old file. It's been converted to constant bitrate. XLights no longer cares whether your files are constant bitrate or variable bitrate, so you don't have to convert them. You just take the file as you download it from wherever you're getting your music files from, and it should work fine. Having done that, you now get to choose your timing. If you don't choose a timing, it will default to 50 milliseconds, which is 20 frames a second. If you're really, really fussy and you've got decent controllers and they can support it, you can go to 25 milliseconds. Generally speaking, I definitely don't bother. 50 milliseconds is fine for most people, but like I said, if you really want to precisely match your song and you think people can tell 40 frames a second, go there. Given that old movies were at 24 frames a second, these days movies are at 30 frames a second. This is to be honest good enough. If you choose 40 frames a second, then your Falcon file is going to be twice as large. Yeah, twice as large as it is at 20 frames a second. I'd never go for 10 frames a second. I don't know why it's here. 10 frames a second is way too coarse, and if you do sequence with this, unless you're just doing some static type thing in the background and you just want your bulbs on, that's fine. But if you're trying to coordinate to music, you need to be at least at 20 frames a second. So we click on that. We now come to importing of data. So importing of data lets you bring in old sequences from these things, including from XLights, so you can bring in someone else's XLights sequence. We'll go through some of these things later. Generally speaking, you don't have to do it here. You can do it later, and we'll talk about importing data at another time. So I'm just going to skip this. Okay, some optional tasks. So editing metadata. Editing metadata is here. You can put some metadata. This stuff here makes absolutely zero difference to your sequence. It's entirely unimportant. Maybe if you were going to make the file, share the file with other people, you might want to put the music URL in so people know how they can go and acquire the music file or something like that. I've never bothered to fill this in. The info and media tab, because I've chosen a song, you really don't want to play with this, but if I'd created an animation, a non-musical sequence, this is where you would come in and set how long you want the sequence to be. When you create an animation, by default, it's only 30 seconds. So if you want it to be 2 minutes, you type 120 into here. Then there's timings. Timings are important. You will be able to manually set timings, and we'll go through shortly how you do that. But you also have the ability to either create some standard timings like 50 milliseconds, because I've set my timing as 50 milliseconds. This is the default, and this will just add a 50 millisecond timing. This is a bad idea, right? This is for people who are used to using other sequences that sequence at the lowest granularity. It's a waste of time in XLights. It's just not worth doing. Some people like to, so I've installed the Queen Mary Vamp plugins. I don't know, I assume most people are familiar with Queen Mary. Just type in Queen Mary Vamp plugin. There's also links to this on Sean's download page for XLights as well. You can come in here and download them. This is all the Vamp plugins. The ones you want are the Queen Mary ones, and there should be a download file here somewhere with all of the Queen Mary plugins in it. I can't remember the queue, I guess. Yeah, there it is, the Queen Mary plugin set. If you download that, just run the install script. It runs in about a second flat. It will install the Queen Mary plugins on your PC. And then when you come into here, instead of just seeing the 50 millisecond, the 100 millisecond and empty, you'll get all of these other ones. Okay? And these are basically plugins that will process the music and attempt to detect things. So let's do the bars. We click OK. There's some settings here. I always take the default, and it quickly processes the audio. And so what it will generate for us is a timing track, which is trying to be or mark out the bars inside the song. Oops, I actually didn't mean to do that. I'll go back and do that again. The other one that can be interesting, but it generates a lot of noise, is the note onset. This one here, note onsets. That attempts to spot when notes start inside the song. The challenge with all of these is it does generate a lot of timing marks, but there's ways to manage that. And finally, there's data layers. Data layers is once again a way to bring in data. We'll talk about that at another time. So if you're bringing in some old data from another sequencer that you want to play through XLights, you can bring it in as a data layer. Data layers aren't editable. You can mix the data layer with XLights effects, but the XLight effects will override the data layer wherever it happens to be. So having done all of that, we've created our timings, we've ignored the metadata because we've chosen the media. Everything here is largely defaulted. We're all good to go. So we click done and it creates our sequence.
Keith, I was just asking whether you can actually set your own timing, as in like 40 milliseconds.
Can you set your own timing? Okay, so first of all, timing can't be any finer than the sequence. Sorry, your sorry, I'll go back up to your settings. Okay, so because we set this song to be 50 milliseconds, you cannot set a timing mark that's anything less than 50 milliseconds. I believe Vixen and others let you arbitrarily choose where you want your timing marks to be, and it doesn't have to be on multiples of 50 milliseconds. While that's great, it actually generates a lot of complexity, and when you do eventually generate your data file for the Falcon Pi player, it's still going to have to be on 50 millisecond boundaries. So it actually doesn't make a lot of value. Now, can you have a song that's 50 milliseconds and then say, I want to generate every second? The answer is there's no automatic way to do that, but you can manually do it. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. All right. So for those that didn't see that, up under settings, the top one here is sequence settings. That gets that same dialogue back. So if you accidentally create an animation and it's only 30 seconds and you want to extend it, you would come up here to do that. You can also come up here to generate more timing tracks, but there's another way to do that as well. So here are our timing tracks. So I'm going to hide some of this stuff for a moment. We'll come back to all of this later. All right, because we'll spend a little bit of time talking about timing tracks and about the audio here. Okay, so you can zoom in and out on this. There is the easy thing to do is to use the pluses and minuses up here. You can also hold down the control key and scroll the mouse wheel, and that will zoom in and out. Or actually, maybe it's just you just hold down the scroll wheel, it's something like that at any rate. Or you can just press plus. Notice as I've pressed plus here, it's not really zooming into the song. If you want it to zoom in on a particularly interesting point, click somewhere near that interesting point, and as it zooms in, it makes sure that that stays on the screen. So you can see as we move in, as I move the mouse across here, notice how the blue line jumps. And the reason the blue line jumps is because that's 50 milliseconds. And so I can't actually set a timing mark outside of a 50 millisecond time. Okay, so we've got 3 timing tracks on this song at the moment right now. The top one is our note onsets, which is what Queen Mary has generated, saying this is where I think the note onsets are. The ones that are numbered are the bars, and then there's a new timing track here which is entirely blank. And you, generally speaking, you get an automatic new timing track which is always blank. Timing tracks can be active or inactive, and they've got different colors, so they show different colored bars. You can only have one timing track active at a time, but it's also valid to have no timing track valid. And we'll see in a minute how that affects how you drop effects onto the timing grid. If you want to set manual timing, we'll select the new timing, and if you click onto the waveform and press the letter T, it will generate a timing mark. You can do that repeatedly. You can, and I'm going to regret this. Hang on a second. Sorry, I just need to set my volume mixer very, very low for XLights, otherwise it'll blast you when I play the song. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this. All right, so what you can do is as the song plays, you can also press the T. So if you're reasonably good at choosing the beats, etc., as you listen to music, then you can just play the song and press the T's. If you're like me and a little bit uncoordinated, you can also come up to the audio menu here and slow the song down. So it also lowers the pitch, so the song starts to sound a little bit weird the further you slow it down, but that can sometimes help. The other thing you can do up here is if you hold down the control key and click the left mouse button and move your mouse along the audio waveform. Hopefully you can hear that. It actually acts like a scrubber, and depending on how zoomed in you are, depends on how much of the song it plays as you move it.
Yeah, we can't hear the music at the moment, Keith.
Oh, you can't? Okay. Okay.
And Kevin was asking, is it easy to delete the timing bars as well?
Yeah, I'll show you that in a second as well. I'll show you how to copy them too. How do I do this? I think it's here. Share computer sound. All right, tell me if you can hear this.
That's better. Yep.
That's better. Okay, so, all right, holding that control key down, the left mouse button, scrub it backwards and forwards. That can help, to be honest. It's relatively new, and I'm trying to do this on a laptop, so it's not the easiest thing to do. But as I said, when you're playing it, press that T button as much as you like. Okay, timing marks are useful because when it comes time to drop effects, if you've got a timing track active, effects will effectively fill up the gap between two timing marks. So it helps you line things up. Once an effect's dropped, however, it's not tied to its timing mark. You can move it around, you can extend it past the timing marks or make it shorter. It just helps you when you're doing dropping. So how do you delete it? Couple of ways. If you click on a timing mark, nothing happens. You click out. Oh, hang on. Okay, sorry. If you click on a timing mark, you can press the delete key and delete it. You can also click and. Why can't I click and drag? Should be able to click and drag. Maybe I have to unselect it. Okay, yeah, I have to unselect it. So if I unselect the timing track, I can click and drag. It's highlighted them all in pink. I press the delete key and it deletes it. If I particularly like this section of the timing track up here, I can press Control C. I can come down to here, press Control V and paste it, and I can paste timing tracks in as well. I can also, paste different sections between different parts of the song. So once I've done the chorus, I can copy it, come back to here, line it up, paste it, I can also grab it as a unit, I believe, and no, I can't drag it as a unit. They are magnetic. What does that mean? So a couple of things. So if I'm dragging it across and I drag it up against one, it'll grab hold of it, and when I move it, they move together. If I want to split it, I move the mouse across until it looks like a finger pointing, and that lets me grab it and pull it apart. I can do the same thing on the other end. If I grab it in the middle and moves it side to side, so I can move it around like that. Okay. I'm not sure there's much else you can do with timing tracks. Like I say, you can move them around, cut and paste them. If you want to, if you realize at this point now that actually I really did want to bring another timing track in, maybe that 50 millisecond timing track was something I did now want. If you come over to the top area here and right click on it, you can add a timing track. This will add a blank one. I don't know, let's call him Fred. So now I've got a nice new timing track that's blank. You can also say, well, actually, I don't need that anymore, and delete it. You can also import a timing track. This lets you grab a timing track from someone else. So let's go back up to here. So I can also export this timing track. So I can export it to a file. By default, it's in this X timing format, which XLights, all recent versions of XLights will support. And then you can just import that into another sequence. So if you've done a song and someone says, yeah, do you have your timing for that particular file? You can save it and you can import it. And there it is there. So you can save and import them. You can also, in the import timing from other things like LOR and LSP and the like. The text files lets you import them from Audacity, and you can also import Papagayo files as timing tracks. And we'll come back to that another time when we touch on how you do talking faces and everything else. However, we wanted Queen Mary. The way to get to the Queen Mary is to go up to settings, sequence settings, into timings, and just like we did before, click on new, choose one of the timings that we're interested in. We'll do let's do the 100 milliseconds. We'll click OK, and we're done. And now we have 100 millisecond timing in. So hopefully that's all about timing tracks, all about waveform up here. There actually are a couple of things with the waveform. You can select a section of the waveform, and if you play it, it will play that section, but then it will keep going. Oh, sorry, stop when it gets to the end. Sorry. Or you can click on the replay section, and that will play that section over and over again. So if you're hearing your new timing track here and you're desperately trying to get that timing mark correct, you can keep going around listening to it. Okay, I missed it, but you get the idea. You can jump around and do that. You can also click up the top, which does something different again. So it immediately plays. If you highlight an area up here, it immediately plays it. Just click once, it will play to the end. It also responds to the space bar. When Gil and the guys put this stuff together, they were very much trying to copy the audio controls for Audacity. So yeah. So up here it tells you whereabouts in the song you are pretty precisely. When it's playing, it also gives you a frames per second count. If that was perfect, that would be 20.0, but it's pretty damn close. Given that before we were used to sit at around 15 or 16 due to some problems in the underlying framework, we're pretty happy with that timing. Okay. All right, so I've reset the screen. XLights has a concept called perspectives. And perspectives are basically the layout of the screen. So I'm on a laptop here. Obviously, I'm trying to share my screen with you. And so I've got everything pretty condensed in. Hopefully, most of you are doing your sequencing with multiple monitors, and you're going to want to spread stuff out. So you would have already seen throughout the earlier part that all of these things are undockable. You can rip them off and you can drag them onto second monitors and all of that sort of stuff. Most people would do things like particularly grab their previews and drag them onto another screen so that they can always see them. You definitely want to be able to see your effect settings. This is a pretty small display of my sequence, but I'm kind of stuck with it because I am going to want you to see all of these other windows as we go along. You can show and hide these things primarily with these buttons up here. The effects I'm not showing at the moment. This just actually reproduces this list of icons, and given that they're already up here, I don't see the reason to show them. We will come to display elements because that's an important window, and all the rest of them are here. And you know, this is the effect settings, which is this piece down here. If I click on it, it goes away. If I click on it again, it comes back. So if you've ever lost it, can't find something, you can try toggling them up here. If it really goes bad on you, right, and you can't find a window, and that sometimes has been known to happen, if you come up to the Windows menu, there's a thing called Reset It to Defaults, and it will reset everything back to how it default comes when it installs. Oops, that was not what, oh, sorry. Okay, once you're happy with your setup, if you come up to the view perspectives, you can save your current perspective or save it and give it a new name. And then if you ever want to get to your perspectives again, you can actually just load them back in. So if you ever get your screen sort of all out of whack and you want to reload it back to the way you like it, you can just load your perspective as I did there. It comes up, gives you a list of them. I've only got the one. And you say, yep, I want to double click and load that. And it relays the screen out according to how you like it. So that's kind of helpful. Okay, so I guess the next thing we want to do is we've got all these models down here in the house preview. And if we want to sequence them, we need to actually get our models into our sequence. And as you can see, there are no models here. We would normally expect to see them here. Now, there's a couple of ways to do this. One way is to right click on here and go edit display elements, and that will let you add your models in. Or you can click on the display elements icon up here and that will bring this window up. Now this is also dockable. Some people I know keep it here all the time. I don't generally do that. I find that it's actually not something that I actually do that often, add models. And once you set up some views, and we'll talk about these, you actually don't need to do this a great deal unless you've added new models along the way. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to ignore our master view and we're going to add our own view. Now, if you've only got a few elements, 20 or 30 elements, you might just want to create one view and do everything. If you've got more than that and you want to sequence maybe all your pixels first and then your dumb elements later, you can actually create multiple views and it can let you filter down the number of models that you're looking at when you're trying to sequence, and that can kind of be helpful. All right, but let's create a demo view. So there it is. And down here you can see that there are no models and no timing tracks inside it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to add some things. So we come into here, we click on the add, and we come into this window here. Up the top are our timings. And so in this case, you can add as many as you like. We're going to add the bars and our new timing only. I'm going to leave out 100 millisecond and the node onsets. In my models, I'm going to add all of my models in. Now, these aren't all models. This pixels is actually a group. If I can't do it here. But look, I'm going to add everything in. Yes, you have to click each one individually. That's one of those things that I guess we need to fix. And click add. as you can see, okay, so we'll close that. And so we come down here and we can see here they all are. That's odd. That's a defect. I'll speak to Gil about that. You should actually see a little icon here to indicate that pixels is a group, whereas matrix is a model. If you remember back to my layout, I'd actually created a group called pixels and a group called whole house. And then, of course, there's everything else. So we'll come back to the sequencer. Oh, okay, there. Okay, didn't refresh. That's interesting as well. So, okay, so this is what it should do: is it should show a little icon to indicate that pixels is a group and whole house is a group as well. And it's added my 2 timing tracks in, and it's left my other timing tracks out. If you've forgotten something and you now want to add it back in, it's interesting as well. You can go back and edit display elements, and you can add things or delete things or change the order of them. The order can be important. Generally speaking, it's a good idea, I think I've got this right, to put your broadest things near the top of your model. And the reason for that is because of the rendering order. If you want to do something special on one element, but you want to do something across the rest of the house, putting your whole house at the top means that when you drop something, so if I was to, okay, let's do this. Let's go and grab, I don't know, let's turn everything white. Okay, so there's everything's white, except on my matrix, I don't know, I want to put a butterfly. Okay, so everything's white, but the butterfly has overruled the whiteness for the matrix, and that's happened because of the order. If I go back into Edit Display Elements, and I was to move the matrix up above the whole house and close it, and if I was to click on, sorry, if I was to play this, but I've got this right. No, I've got it wrong. Oh, I could have sworn that was the rendering order. Okay, I'm making myself look like an idiot, aren't I? Okay, there is a rendering order. I thought it was that if you had something like the matrix at the top here, that the whole house would overrule it. But clearly I've got that wrong. All right. So that's how you add models onto the sequencer. Still going to move that back down though. Just like before, you can, if you want to delete, you can select effects that you've dropped here. So if I fill this up with effects, okay, there's a bunch of effects on things. If I want to get rid of them, I just click over here, highlight that section, press the delete key, and they're gone. What I did then with the random effects, if you select an area, right click and say create random effects, it will go and generate a whole bunch of random stuff. Not especially useful, to be honest, except sometimes it can show you some interesting things and you can then go and copy some settings. So, anyway, let's talk about the rest of our windows up here. So up here are all the effects. There's a huge number of them and they all do slightly different things, and it's going to take us some time to go through them all, so we're not going to do that first up. When you've got an effect, there are 4 panels here, and these 4 panels are actually all talking about the effect that is selected. The main one that people tend to play with is the effect settings. So these are the settings that are directly unique and special for that particular effect. So let's go on. What we'll do is I'll delete those. Let's put something really, actually really straightforward with bars. We'll put bars on our pixels. Okay, so it has a bunch of settings here that you can set. Repetitions decides how many times the colors repeat. The cycles really just controls how fast it happens. In XLights, you don't have super fine-grained control. This effect is set with a duration that runs for, I don't know, it's about a second. And it's going to go through 3.1 cycles of the bars in those 3 seconds. If you change the length of the effect, you will change its speed. So if I stretch it out, the bars slow down. If I bring it back in, the bars speed up. Okay, so the speed of effects is a combination, generally speaking, of the length of the effect, right, and then the settings that are in here. With bars, you know, you've got things like which direction it's going to go in and stuff like that, right? But these are all unique and special and different for each of the individual effects up here. But there are a bunch of other things that are common across effects. The first and most obvious one here is the color bar. So up here, you get to select which colors you want to use. By default, it's white if no colors are selected. If you choose a color, in the case of bars, obviously, the more colors I choose, the more colored bars I end up with. Every effect uses the colors slightly differently. The order is important. If I really wanted that blue first, I'm going to have to make this thing a blue. To change what color a particular square is, just click on the color and a color pop up appears, and I want to make it purple. And so now that one's purple, and if I select it, I get a purple bar. Okay, if you want, you know, and you can have two, right? I can make this one green as well, so I can have green, red, green, and I'll get a double green in my bars. That's entirely possible. So you get 8 of these, and you can put as many as you like. Sparkles adds an overlay of sort of, it's hard to see, I guess, but sparkly white. Actually, let's make that black. Does it help? Not really. It doesn't sparkle when it's black. That's interesting. But yeah, sparkles reflects the background. Brightness controls the overall brightness of the effect. So whether it's super bright or very dim, and contrast, to be honest, I've never played with. So this panel here is all about colors, but it's entirely about this particular effect. If I grab another effect and put it down here, I can independently control its colors. But when I drop it, it keeps everything from the previous one. So if I want this to be no sparkles, I have to set it back down to no sparkles. But this one will still have sparkles. Not that you can see them, but you can see that the slider is set in the middle, and here it's not. But by default, when I drag it down and put the next, actually I won't do that one. When I drag the next thing down, it will keep whatever settings were in place for the last time I dropped an effect. And I think that was one of the questions that someone asked at the beginning. Why does it work that way? Well, it kind of works that way because a lot of people sequence by doing the same thing on several models. So they'll grab an effect and they'll drop it onto a model, they'll tune it up the way they like it, and then they'll say, okay, now I want to apply that effect on these other arches, and they'll go and drag that effect down on each arch. And in doing so, what happens is those settings remain constant as you do it. So that's your color settings. I'll talk about your layer settings next rather than the layer blending settings. So the layer settings control things like we talked last week about, you know, whether something is single line or per preview or default. This is how the buffer that sits across the model is created. So by default, it obeys the rules of the model. So if I was to get okay, so let's get rid of that. Let's bring our bars effect down onto our matrix. Okay, let's make it red and green so it stands out. Get rid of that one. Okay, so as you can see, it's just red and green sliding across, and the render style is default. Now, there'll be no difference between default and preview, but if I do it in single line, and it's a little bit hard to see here, if I change, cycles, just make it faster. Yeah. Notice how there's actually a zigzag here, and that's because what it's done is it's taken all of these pixels and lined them up into one really, really long line, and then it's doing the bars across that line. And so it's a different shape of a buffer that it's applying the effect to. 9 times out of 10, you'll just go with the default. Transformations allow you to do things like rotate things, flip them, and so forth. Again, a lot of the effects, particularly the older effects, if this was necessary, it was built into the effect. But with a lot of the newer effects, we just haven't bothered. It's not necessary because we can always do a transformation on the buffer using this setting here. Blur lets you actually apply a Gaussian blur. So you can see how it's blurred the red and the green bars together. That could be a lot more dramatic with something like a wave. And if you pump up the blur, you get a sort of blurred out wave going on, and that could be really good for creating 3D effects and the like. Right, so, and then finally you have this here, which lets you do things like restrict the size of a particular effect and constrain it to a particular area of a model rather than covering up the entire model. Little known is the fact that you can right click it and set it to some defaults. So if you want it to be the bottom half, or you want it to be the right half, you can do that. Now what this does is it actually shrinks the size of the buffer. So you see that the effect shrinks as if only half of the model is being painted on, rather than cutting off half and staying the same size. It actually compresses it. You watch that waveform and you can see how it's about 2 cycles, I think, there. And if I make it the full buffer, I've still got 2 cycles. The waveform's just more stretched out. This is also where you'll find the rotate and zoom function. So if I want it to start small and then grow and fill the model, or if I want it to explode and spin clockwise until it fills the model, things like that are all definable using the layer settings. And then finally, you've got your blending. Your blending is where you can do things like transitions in and out and transitions between effects on different layers. And we'll touch on layers in just a moment. So they're the main windows here, and all of them are focused on the currently selected effect. A lot of people look at this and see all of these windows and think that somehow one applies to something different and the like, but they actually all apply to the currently selected effect. And if I move on to another model, all of these settings will change to reflect whatever other effect I'm looking at. So before I move on, let me check to see if there's any questions. None? So let's talk about layers then. So last week we showed how you can double click on a model and you can see the strands, and you can double click on the strands and you can see the nodes. And I don't know if I showed you this, but you know, I can come up to here, grab one of the on effects, and I can drop it on strand 1. The color happens to be red here. If I want it to be green, I can make it green. And you can see that it's highlighted strand 1 on my matrix, which is kind of what you'd expect it to do, right? If I go to strand 3, node 3, I can also go and drop an on effect on that. And there it is, just there. I've turned on a single node. So if you're really obsessed and want to be absolutely pixel perfect and think that it's a good idea to drag things in at that level, you can do it. As I think I said last week, I think you're insane, but hey, I'm not here to judge. So you can drill down. But the other thing you can do here is if you right click on the model, you can insert a layer. You can insert layers above and below, and you can insert as many of these as you like. Right, so you can have lots and lots and lots of layers going on. So we had a wave effect there. Now we've got 2 wave effects right going on, but no one's seeing anything different, right? It's all looking the same. So let's I don't know. Let's start to mix them up a little, make them look a little bit different so they start to stand out a little bit more. So you can see there's several different waves on top of one another, and they all get blended together in some format to represent the final outcome. Now you get to control how they come together, and you do that using this settings up here. Right, now these are kind of hard to use, and I say that because there's so many of them, and understanding exactly how they come together gets very confusing. There is a help screen here that you could just mouse over and it'll pop up, and it tries to explain how the various settings work together. I strongly suggest you experiment. I can't remember how they all come together, but it does give you some interesting powers. So I'm going to show you that. So I'm going to grab. So okay. So I'm going to grab that waveform again. Let's put our wave on there. It's nice and thick. Let's get rid of the sparkles. We don't really need sparkles, but we'll put it on there and leave it blue. And then we're going to go and grab the butterfly and put it in the background. So that's not what I want. What I want is I want the waveform here to be the butterfly. And we can do that using these layer settings. And it's going to be one of the masks. So one is a mask? No. One is an unmask. There we go. So the waveform is being drawn, and it's unmasking the butterfly, which is sitting in the background. Okay, so there are literally a dozen of these things. You can blend them together in a more of an averaged way. So now you can see that the blue and the underlying butterfly are kind of blended together. I believe this is how Vixen, or something similar to how Vixen does it when it brings them together. But like I said, I've never used it. It was one is an unmask, wasn't it? Yeah, there it is. So using layers, you can blend all of these things together. You can have as many as you like. By default, black color passes through black. When you look at something like one of Lilia's sequences where she's where she'll be working on a tree, and she'll have up to 15 different layers on a tree at a time, overlaying effects to get exactly what she wants it to look like. The other thing that you can do here, so let me get timing, so find a nice clean part of the song. Okay. Sorry, do that. Okay. So that's 1 second. All right, so what I'm going to do is, the other thing you do with this part, with this area, is you can do transitions. So generally speaking, most of you, when you sequence, do exactly what I do. All right, I've got a bars effect. It's a very busy bars effect. And I've got a butterfly. Okay. Damn sparkles again. Get rid of those damn sparkles. Okay, and what happens is, here's our, it looks, there goes our bars, and then we cut over and we're showing the butterfly, and it's a jarring thing. And some of you would have played with things like fades. So let's overlap this by a second. And what we want to do is for the last second, so for 1 second, we want to fade. Oh, sorry. Hang on. We'll do it on the out. So for this effect here, for the last second, we want to fade it out. And then this one here, for the first second, we want to fade it in. This internet connection is unstable. Hopefully you're still hearing it. And now what happens is it fades in and out. So you get a crossfade effect, which is, yeah, that's great, except it's kind of boring, right? Every sequencer can do that. And we don't like doing what every sequencer can do. Oh, actually, no, we will leave that at 1. And we will leave that as 1. But what we'll do, I don't know, let's make it a clock. Make that a clock. We'll reverse it. And so now what happens is you get a clock transition where it wipes it around and reveals the other effect. And so there's a whole bunch of these transition effects that you can use. You just have to remember that often with the fade or the transition out versus the transition in, sometimes you have to do the reverse to get it to look how you want to do. But, so that's these layer blending. All right, so let me talk through this. So here's my logical model of how XLights works. So we haven't played with the setup tab yet, but on the setup tab, you get to define your controllers and you get to map your controllers to things like universes and COM ports and IP addresses and all of that sort of stuff. As a result of that, you end up with these XLight channels, and our XLight channels run from 1 to however many channels we've defined. And you'll remember last week we cheated and we just created a null controller, and this one I've given it 10,000 channels. So on here, this would be channels 1 through 10,000, and but we could also map those 1 to 10,000 channels out to a whole bunch of E131 universes or out to some LOR controllers and the like. And then what we did was we painted a whole bunch of models and model groups and strands and nodes, etc., to those XLight channels. So if you remember, in our layout, actually, let's click on our tree here. Here's our tree, and this tree happens to be on channel 3751. Right, so 3751 is the channel in this XLights address space that particular tree is mapped to. Okay. Now, in order to get an effect onto that tree, we start with an effect, and we put an effect onto a layer. So we saw that, and we dropped it onto a layer, aided them, so we did a mask of length of the low, a blur or a rotate, etc. Actually, I think the buffer transformation occurs before the blend. The blend's actually the last thing that happens. And that then gets applied onto the model. So something like this stuff that we've been doing here with this clock transition on our matrix, we've got a tree down here. So let's go and put 2 layers on it. So I can go over here and click on my model, and I'm going to bring it down and put it on the second layer of my tree. And I'm going to bring this one down and put it on the first layer of my tree. And then I'm going to click on here, and I get exactly the same result. Right? So generally speaking, effects are entirely independent of the model that they're put on. So you can copy them around, move them, because underneath that model just turns into a buffer. So look, I can do the same thing with my waveform here. So if I bring that down and I plop that on the tree, I'm just pressing the down arrow key. When you've selected it, you can just move effects down. Okay, it looks kind of funky because the tree obviously doesn't have the same resolution that the matrix has. So I could reduce the number of waves and maybe to get that effect to look a little bit better. So sometimes you need to rescale things, but it's exactly the same result on a slightly different model. just by moving them around. Makes sense?
Yep, sure does. Now, this
Right.
guy's got a question too, just on can he design his house, then start sequencing, and come back later and add items as he goes and sequence each of those in every song?
Absolutely, you can. So obviously, every year your house changes. You take models out, you add models in, etc. You absolutely can. So if let's save this just for the hell of it. What do we call? I will replace it. Okay. So let's imagine it's a few weeks later, and I felt rich, and I went out and bought one of these fancy new spinners. We have 6 arms. Actually, no. Extra rich this week. We got 8 arms. Okay, so we've added our model. We come back to our sequencer. Unfortunately, our spinner's not here, but that's okay. We can edit our display elements, and we can add our spinner in. There he is. It's the only model that's not in our show. And now he's in my show, and I can go and put something onto it. Like, there we go. There's the bars effect on it. Oh, why is it so slow? It's so slow because it's on a huge amount of time. Let's go over to here. Grab our bar. Where is spirals? There it is. And we'll drop him on. Okay, so he's blue. Doesn't look particularly special like that, does he? So this is an example of where we want to go over to our buffer and not use the default, but maybe use per preview to get a slightly different. And this is because when I built the spinner model, I built the spinner model, so by default it actually built a matrix out of these pixels. I did that because something like a bars effect, right? If I reduce the number of cycles, so you can see how it's just painting the bars across, but I wanted people to be able to do things like that, have it spinning around, or even single line effects, etc. So you can see how the one effect has different outcomes, because in this case I've created different shapes of buffers depending on what's going on. And that looks like that because of the direction it's going in. If that was an up effect, you can see that it creates a bars effect that looks extremely different. And that's the power of XLights and this abstraction of buffers away from models, away from layers and effects, etc., and how it all comes together and combines them. Okay. All right. So where we go next? Let's talk about cut and paste. So I've been showing you dragging in effects and dropping them, and you can see that it's filling up the time slice that's marked out by the timing marks. So, yeah, it fills it out. If you get rid of the timing bars, so you deselect any of your timing tracks, you can then come in and drag it, and what it will do is it will default the length of that particular effect to I think it's 1 second. Okay, when you've got a timing track, it'll always drag it in and fill whatever that timing track is. But when you don't have a timing track selected, you can just drag it in. There's also, we've shown you delete. So when there's no timing track, you can do selects like so. And you notice how the selects aren't bound to any timing marks. When I have timing marks selected, I can click and select, but it grabs everything within the current sets of timing marks. I can do things like Control C, and I can come over to here and press Control V, and it will paste all of those effects in. All right. So what it's done when I've done that is you notice that it's kept The timing is everything exactly the same size. If I select paste by cell, and I must admit I'm not an expert on this, but let's change the timing bars to this. And if I click here and I press Control V, what it does is it actually shrinks everything down and fits it within the current set of timing marks, and that's because I've done paste by cell rather than paste by time. If I go back to paste by time and click here, notice how everything hasn't been shrunk down to fit within the current cell, but it's kept the same time that it used to be, and it's spread it all out, and it's largely ignored the timing tracks, which define the cells. If I grab that and highlight a bunch of cells, so what I've done is I've grabbed one particular effect, I've pressed Control C, I highlight a stack of cells and press Control V, it copies those things across and paints as many as I need. Last week I showed that when you had a bunch of these things selected, you could hold down the Alt key, click on the edge and drag it, and it would do things like stagger effects. You can also, having selected them all, so if I go and grab all of those things, and if I think I hold down the Shift key, I can then, damn it, come here. So yeah, when I hold down the Shift key, I can drag them all as a unit rather than individually. So there's a whole bunch of funky keystrokes. They are all documented in the manual. They do change from time to time. I know Gil's been trying to fill people's needs for how they cut and paste things within the sequencer to make it easier. Obviously, people like to use the same effects in similar parts of the song, and so the cut and paste things can really save you a huge amount of time. I suggest if you're going to do anything elaborate, you do a save, back it up, and then go and do your play around with it, because it's easy to get it wrong, and it can be frustrating to have to go back and reline everything up after the fact. Okay, there's a couple other things I'd like to show that aren't immediately obvious. So one thing is the value curves. So most of the settings in this thing are pretty straightforward, right? If you put the bars effect on, which we were seeing earlier, there's some sliders here which let you say how much something happens. Sometimes you get a drop down which lets you change a few things, and you might get the ability to set a checkbox and get a slightly different look and feel to things. And most of the things work like this. Sometimes you get something really elaborate, like the pictures effect, where you can go and choose a file, and there's tabs with start positions and end positions. The pictures effect is actually so complicated; it's got its own editor for doing things like actually editing images. All right. So it's a little embed drawing tool. Personally, I don't use it. I'd use something like Piscal or something, because it's so much more powerful. Although this, to be honest, tries to duplicate a lot of that functionality, like being able to create animations and the like. But it's, at the end of the day, it's great for a few simple things. You definitely need a lot of screen real estate. You can't do it when you're on a laptop. There's just not enough room here. And there are a couple of others of these that have similar sorts of effect assistants that can pop up when you need them. But increasingly across them, you're seeing buttons that look like this, which looks like a bit of a curve, a grey button with a bit of a curve. And what this is a value curve. And the concept of a value curve is, you've got a slider here. It's set at 100 at the moment. I can set it at 50 and it colors halfway up the effect. I can set it to 0 and it's not at all. And so this slider actually just controls how much it fills up your particular model. If this was on the tree, let's move it down to the tree. Similar thing, right? I can fill up how much of the model. But we quickly came to the realization, well, the problem with this is it leaves you with very static looking effects. There's your bars effect, it slides across, it's interesting, but it's very static looking. And what we wanted to know was, well, could we change things during the duration of effect? And this is where the value curves come in. When you click on them the first time, the value curve appears. And it shows, you can imagine this is the start of the effect, and this is the end of the effect. And the green bar shows you the value that will be enforced during that during the time of the effect. And you can see here, the bar doesn't move up or down, and so the line's flat. And I can change where the line is, but it's flat. But there's a whole bunch of other things in here. So I can choose a sine wave. Okay, and if I apply that, what happens is over the course of the effect, it slides up and it slides down. Okay, what's happening? Well, it's now ignoring this value, and instead what it's doing is it's following that curve to set the value over the time of the effect. Okay, click on it a second time. Sorry. When you set it, it's like that. When you click on it another time, it disables it and it goes back to manual. Okay. So you can set this to a whole bunch of different types. There's a whole bunch of predefined curves. There's a whole bunch of sliders here that let you fine tune exactly what that looks like and so forth. There's even, sorry. You can even go having got something that's roughly what you want, you can come down to custom, and then you can just click and drag, and you can set the curve manually, however you want. These points here, you can click on it and press the delete and it'll get rid of it. It supports Control Z, so you can undo. Actually, I should have said, so does the sequencer down here. Having done something, you can press Control Z and it will undo it. And so now you've got an effect that jumps around a bit because of the value curve that we just created, etc. So on the fill effect, I use the fill effect as an example because it's the most obvious of what's happening. But there's a whole bunch of these effects which are pretty cool with it. So take something like our sine wave. Well, we saw our sine wave. Well, that's kind of interesting. But you can set a ramp, and now it starts spread out and it compresses in. And if we applied the sine wave to it, it compresses in and it compresses out. So now it's like a spring. Okay, and then you could overlay it with masks and everything else, and I can make that a rainbow colored spring or whatever else. Right, so the value curves are incredibly powerful. They don't appear everywhere. In some cases, they don't appear because we haven't got to them yet. In other places, they don't appear because the underlying nature of the particular effect actually makes it not possible to put it on. It also appears up here on a number of things. So here's blur. So we can go back into our, let's blur it on a sine wave, but let's step the amplitude down a bit because it gets very blurry if it's blurred. And so now as it springs in, it blurs out and then it goes back out again. And you know, maybe you want to fade it in and out at the end. So we can do a ramp up, down, hold. So it's, oh, why did that not work? Ramp up, down, hold. Okay. Maybe it's a little bit short. So you can see it's starting black and then it comes in. So you're getting a sort of a fade in, fade out. combined. So a whole bunch of these value curves could be applied to a whole bunch of different parameters, and it adds yet another dimension to how the effects work. So that one's kind of a new concept. I don't know, yeah, looks like VU meter. Is there an effect that will actually mimic the audio peaks? Is there? Funny that you should ask. There is. Here it is here. It's called VU meter. Sorry. Sorry, things are getting a bit busy here. Let's just delete a whole bunch of crap. Okay, we'll drag this in, put it on the matrix. Okay, now of course I have to undo all of these things. My brightness 100. I really don't want it blurry. Okay. What else have I forgot? Why does that look like that? Make that white. Maybe it is. All right. So what you've got here is this waveform, the audio waveform being displayed on my matrix. It's probably not the best part of the song to show that in. Delete it. I'll come back here and do it here, because you can see the quiet bits. And so, yeah, so it's showing the waveform. The current point in the song is currently here on the right. Of course, I think what you're actually after is a spectrogram, which shows the frequency breakdown of the song as it plays. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff here that can react to the song. So okay, I was expecting that to be a little bit more interesting. So here's a shape. This one happens to be a circle that pulses in and out with the intensity of the music. Let's overlay that with a, oh, what the hell? Oh, okay. Sorry, normal. And normal. Right, sorry. I still had the mask on. So here we've got fireworks. Fireworks colors aren't spectacular, but the fireworks are actually able to fire with the music, and you can set a trigger level. And so when the music crosses a particular trigger level, a firework goes off. This is probably not the best song for it. It doesn't really have, oh, actually down here it might. So if we were to do it down here, fireworks. We'll set that like that. We might pump up the intensity a little. Select that bit. Play it. It's a bit quiet. I don't know about you guys, but I can't hear that.
Yeah, a little bit quiet.
A little bit quiet. I had it on 0. All right. Forgive me if this blasts your ears. Hang on. So you see how those fireworks sort of triggered with some of the intensity of the music? You know, it was probably a little bit not quite sensitive enough. So yeah, so there are a number of effects here that that have started to reflect the music. Sparkles. sparkles. Meteors, even snowfall can fall with the intensity of the music. So as the music intensity builds, the snow starts to fall faster, and things like that. The VU meter effect has a whole bunch of different things that can do, that gets really interesting with the changes in the intensity of the music. So whether it's intensity wave, where is it? Yeah. Struggling with it right now. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of these effects which will follow the music. All right. So what else? Have we got any questions here? Would this mainly be used on things like megatrees and matrix type elements? Actually, no, not just. So one of the things that you can do is one of the VU meter effects actually attempts to just follow the intensity of the music. Sorry, I think is pulse one of them. Trying to remember which one it is and how to drive it. I'm doing it all from memory. There's one of them where the intensity of the bulbs follows the intensity of the music, and so you can put that on pretty much any sort of object that you want to follow that thing. Obviously, things like the waveform and the spectrogram are really only good on a matrix or a tree or something that's got lots and lots of bulbs. But some of these things like the on, even the intensity wave, which, oh, I know why I need two colors. So the intensity wave as a wash, where the color varies between white and red according to the intensity of the music. And even that can provide an interesting background onto an object. The on effect, because the on effect's not working the way I thought it was. The color on effect, so this changes between red and white according to the intensity of the music. The more intense the music, the more it changes color, and you can set several colors. And so as it reaches towards the peak, it will get closer to blue. And you set your colors appropriately, maybe set them to different shades or whatever you want to be, and it will interpolate the colors. So even some dumb LEDs, etc., can look potentially follow those colors. You set that to, so if you set that to black and that to white, right, and it's not sure why it's pink. It's weird. Oh, maybe because I had it on the wrong. Just something funky going on there, I think, with the color. I think maybe the channels are out or something. Anyway, but you get the idea that it can follow the music, and even on non-matrix elements, you can still use these music type effects to get some good outcomes. Okay, so without delving too deeply yet into all the effect settings, we've covered off all the color settings here, the brightness, the sparkles. We talked about the concept of the sparkles reflecting the music. As the song gets more intense, we get more and more sparkles. Things like that are supported there. We've shown you the We didn't show you all of the transitions. We just showed you the clock one, but you can do transitions with effects. The secret is that you need 2 effects on 2 different layers overlapped by the same amount, and you can do the in and out transitions and get a really good look going on. We've talked about the various combinations. We have, like I said, I strongly suggest you play with them, because it's only when you play with them you start to get a feel for what they can do. We talked about the changing here of the buffer and restricting effects to being part of a model rather than all of a model. This also lets you do things like say on this model I wanted a fire and the spinning thing, and I can come up to here and say, well, actually the fire I want on the bottom half, the spinning thing right mouse button I want on the top half. Okay, I give up, something funky going on here. I do not know what is going on for some reason. Well, that's black and white. That should not be happening. It shouldn't be white. Oh, again, I got bloody unmasked. That's what's going on. Okay, so there you go. So I've got the spinning thing at the top half of the model, and I've got the fire at the bottom half of the model. And what it's done is it's just taken my model and it's split it in half. If I grab that item and I move it down to my tree, it will do exactly the same thing on my tree. Spinner at the top, fire at the bottom. So yeah, that's probably why I was having dramas with some of these things. Yeah, there it is. It's unmasked when it shouldn't have been. Got to be careful with these damn settings inheriting themselves. Oh, it was our firework. Don't know where my other one was. This one? Yeah. So get my on effect working now. Okay, so all right. So here's that on effect. This is what I was trying to show earlier. So here you've got the lights that are lighting up in proportion to the intensity of the music. So if I find an area of the music over here which is a little bit more variable, and you can watch it go. You see how the intensity has happened here. There's even one here that lets you, so there's this note on. So note on sounds like it's exactly the same. It looks like it's exactly the same. The thing is, you can say down here, I only want it to react to the really low frequencies in the music. So you can create an on effect that actually just responds to the bass in the music. And it will ignore any treble intensity. And it does that by basically looking at the spectrogram here, which you've seen. And it's, in this case, of course, now I'll play with it. But yeah, it would only look at the bottom half of the spectrogram to decide how bright it is, and it ignores this upper part of the spectrogram when it does it. So, any other questions? Because I think I've covered all the generic stuff. Then how do I do stagger again? Okay. All right. So couple other things I'll show you. So first of all, if you highlight a bunch of cells and press the O key, it'll put the on effect. If you push the D key, oops, it'll give you an error. That wasn't very good. I have to work on that. And I think if you press an R key, oh, it does wrong one. So basically there are shortcut keys for certain things, but to answer your question, if you select these 4 items, and if you go down to the bottom corner here, hold down the Alt key, and then click and drag, you can drag it out and shear it like that and do the stagger. Can you paste a whole row to the end of a row? So can I copy everything that is on this line in the tree? I can copy that row, and I can come down to here and I can paste that row, and it's copied all the effects that were on that tree down to the spinner. Did that answer that one? What am I missing? Everything's going so fast. Yeah, you'll spend a lot of time playing with the effect parameters. There are an enormous number there. It's almost impossible to get all of them. It's actually really good to look at what other people have done. Would this be mainly used on things like Megatree? So we answered that one. Logan's smoke machine. Yes. So there is actually even a DMX effect for controlling things like smoke machines and spinning heads and whatever else. So much easier than manually sequencing the beats. Absolutely. Well, that's the whole idea of VU Meter. When I put that stuff together, I was looking for the effects to be smarter about the music and take advantage of the fact that we actually knew what the music was doing and we could react to it. Some areas it works really well, but like that. So Binny asked, is it acting to the bars you set or the actual song? Okay, that's interesting. So Binny, it can actually do both. So there is in VU Meter, let me go across here a little bit. So we've got the bars selected up there. I'm going to drag another VU Meter in, and I'm going to stretch him out across several bars. Okay, so under here, there is timing event. There's a timing event, color. Okay, so let's set him to be, I don't know, 3 or 4, there we go, several colors. Okay, let's get it right. Timing event color. Okay, and let's play it. And what it's, oh, our note on sets. It would help if I chose the right one. So let's choose bars. So what it's going to do as I play it is each time as the playing bar goes along, stay free, as it goes along, each time it hits one of these timing bars, it's going to change color automatically. So you just set the color order that you want it to go through, you point it at the appropriate timing track, and as the song plays, every time it hits a timing track, it will automatically switch between the colors that you've chosen. So you don't have to go and drop a different color effect for each bar. All right. Well, yeah, it's meant to be. Okay, so can I ask a setup of an element question? Well, of course you can. What's the question though, Benny? You can flick your audio on if it's easier. A roof string. Okay, so you want me to show you how to set a roof string up? Yes, no? Yes, but 2. Okay, so with a roof string, like say a peaked roof or something, I'm imagining is where it gets drama. The easiest thing to do is you grab the single line, you draw your line up one side, go and grab it and draw another one. Or remember, like last week I said you could double click. Right, so there's your roof line, and then you come over here. It works slightly different in 37, but in the next release, you'll right click, you'll go add group, you'll call it your roof line, you'll come down to here, and you'll look at these 2 single lines that I just added, and I'll add them in. Oops, it's not a star or a tree, it's a single line. I'll add them in, I'll click save, I'll come back to my sequencer, I'll right click, edit display elements, I'll find my roof line. Oh, sorry, it's not there. I have to add it. There's my roof line. I'll add it. I'm done. So here's my roof line down the bottom here. Sorry, we keep moving this thing around. There's my roof line. I'm probably going to want something like a bars effect on it. And so there's the bars effect on your roof line. And it acts like it's one model, right? So if you change the bars effect to go up, it will go up as if it was one model. Right? And that's the power of XLights, is when you create a group and you drop something onto a group, it acts like that group is just one thing. Right? Including your whole house. Right? So if I come up and drag a whole house effect on, you can see over every model, it's doing exactly the same thing. Pixicles, so they're the icicles, right, which are made out of pixels. Absolutely, you can do that, right? So you come back again to our layout, and remember, there's a model for that. There's our icicles model, right? So there he is. You come back into, we'll save him. Got to remember to save. Come back here. We can go in, edit display elements, add our icicles. Done. Damn screen real estate. Okay, there's our icicles. You want a bars effect on it. Okay, and so there's your bars effect. Even better would be something like something like meteors going down. And you could change the color, etc. Yes, but I designed 6 rows of pixels all the same length. Yeah, that's okay. So we'll come back to our layout. Here it is here. Okay, this is set up at 3, 4, 5, but now it's set up at 6. Done. So now you've got your pixels. I go back and I click save, go back to my sequencer. I click again on my model. Let's put our bars effect back on it so you can see them all. Okay, they're all there. You didn't have to redo anything. You didn't have to repaint your model or anything. Your effect just would have changed, and it automatically adapts to whatever your model now looks like. If you want to go and solder an extra pixel on the bottom, that's cool. Just go and change the model definition, tell it it's now got 7, and it will just change.
In LOR, if you've got an effect, you can then just copy that to the whole end of the row. And because I've still got some just basic AC stuff, I've got things where I just want to go like paste from here just to the whole end of the row, just have it on.
But yeah, okay, but you don't need to. So here's my red string. This is a dumb red string. So you can imagine this is a set of lights that you've bought from Big W or something. Okay. And so let me get rid of the effect that's on it. So if you want it just to be on for your whole show, right, come up, grab your on effect, drop it on your model. Okay, it looks really small because I don't have a timing track active. Right, and just drag the end out all the way to the end of the song. Okay. If I'd had a timing mark at the beginning and the end, I could have just dragged it on. And so that's now on throughout the whole show. Why is it not on right now? It's not on right now because this effect isn't actually, this string is actually a red set of lights. So if I set it to white, it turns it on. And so you can see here's the red string of lights here turned on, and it will stay on through the whole song because that effect goes over the whole song. I do this in my show. I got a bunch of dumb lights, and I just drag a white on effect onto those lights when I want them on, and it just turns on and stays on for the whole show. So you don't have to copy it lots of times. You just have to stretch it out. Remember, these aren't cells. You're not filling in each individual cell. You're saying, I want this effect to start at this point and end at that point. And in this case, you want it to start at the beginning of the song and end at the end of the song. So you don't have to have more than one of them. Just one will do. Okay, so what I was thinking next week is that next week I would do a more exhaustive analysis of each of these effects and what they do and how they work. It'll get a little bit repetitive at times, I think, as we jump into some of them, and some of them are much more complicated than others. But yeah, it'll give you a better feel for what you can use. Look, I'll give you some hints as to the ones which I see most commonly used versus those that are very rarely used or only for very specific use cases. You know, things like bars and butterfly, quite commonly used, but things like curtain. To be honest, curtain's an interesting one because more people use it as a mask than actually ever show it. And even something like fill, I could imagine, will be used often as a mask, or as often as a mask as it is to actually display anything.